Every day, 3,700 people die on the world's roads every single day, and yet, when the headlines appear, driver loses control. Pedestrian hit in tragic accident. We accept it. We sigh, shake our heads, and move on. But what if it's not an accident? What if it's the system working as designed? What if the reason tens of thousands of people die every year on our roads isn't about bad luck, but about policy, money, and power? Because once you start to follow the trail, from the first car crash in 1896, to billion-dollar lobbying campaigns, to the way our cities are built today, you realize something terrifying. Crashes aren't accidental. They're political. The invention of speed, let's go back, before car crashes even had a name. In 1896 in London, a woman named Bridget Driscoll became the first recorded pedestrian killed by an automobile. The coroner called it, quote, a tragic accident. That single word, accident, stuck. It framed car deaths as unfortunate, unavoidable, an act of fate. But nothing about what happened to Bridget Driscoll was inevitable. Back then, the speed limit in the UK was 4 miles per hour. Cars were new, cities were built for people, and every collision was a scandal. Then, car companies began rewriting the narrative. The rise of motordom. By the 1910s, the automobile was becoming the symbol of progress and profit. Ford was mass-producing Model Ts. General Motors was exploding in growth, and streets were the battleground. Cities were filled with children playing, vendors selling, pedestrians crossing freely. Cars were the intruders, and the public fought back. In 1923, in Cincinnati, citizens gathered 30,000 signatures demanding speed governors to limit cars to 25 miles per hour inside city limits. The automobile lobby panicked. That's when Motordom, a coalition of automakers, oil interests, and road associations, launched a cultural counterattack. They hired PR firms. They sponsored city safety weeks, and they introduced a new word, jaywalker. A jay was slang for a country bumpkin, a fool. By turning ordinary pedestrians into jaywalkers, car companies shifted the blame. Now, if you were hit, it was your fault. Not the cars, not the cities, not the policies, and it worked. Within a decade, roads were no longer public spaces. They were motorways, and the victims became invisible. The engineered street. Once the public accepted that roads belonged to cars, the engineers took over. Throughout the 1930s to 1960s, a new philosophy took hold. Safety through speed and separation. The faster cars could move, the more efficient a city was said to be. Urban planners ripped up tram lines. They banned pedestrians from crossing mid-block. They built wider lanes, longer sight lines, higher speed limits, all in the name of safety. But what they were really building was a death trap. The numbers game. Every 10 miles per hour added to an average street increases the fatality risk exponentially. A pedestrian hit at 20 miles per hour has a 90% chance of surviving. At 40 miles per hour, only 10%. Yet for decades, cities raised speed limits, not lowered them. Why? Because engineers were designing for level of service, a metric created by the U.S. Highway Research Board in the 1950s. It graded roads from A to F based not on safety, not on lives saved, but on how fast cars could move. Pedestrian delays? Cyclists? Transit users? They didn't even count. So while engineers called it traffic flow, what they were really measuring was how efficiently humans could be pushed out of their own cities. The car as a political project, it wasn't just bad planning. It was policy by design. After World War II, governments saw the automobile as the key to middle-class prosperity. In the U.S., President Eisenhower's Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 poured $25 billion into highways, the largest public works project in history. Entire neighborhoods, often black, poor, or immigrant, were bulldozed to make way for interstates. In Detroit alone, over 100,000 people were displaced. The message was clear. Cars meant progress. Communities were collateral damage. The breaking point. The 1970s reckoning. By the 1970s, the consequences were impossible to ignore. In 1972, the United States hit its deadliest year on record. 54,589 traffic deaths. More than the Vietnam War's US combat toll. And yet, politicians kept calling them accidents. But then, a small group of reformers began pushing back. Ralph Nader and the Fight for Accountability. In 1965, a young lawyer named Ralph Nader published a book, unsafe at any speed. It accused car manufacturers, especially General Motors, of designing vehicles that look good but killed. GM tried to discredit him with a smear campaign, even hiring private investigators to dig into his personal life. It backfired spectacularly. Congress summoned GM executives for public hearings. Nader's testimony led to the creation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration (NHTSA) and the first federal safety standards. Seatbelts, crumple zones, airbags, all of these came from that moment. But here's the twist. Even as cars became safer, roads didn't, because the system itself, the design, the policy, the incentives remained the same. The hidden economics of crashes. Every fatal crash is tragic, but to certain industries, it's also profitable. Auto repair shops, insurance companies, hospitals, lawyers, even city budgets, which collect fines and fees from speeding tickets. In 1997, economist Ian Savage calculated that road crashes cost the U.S. economy over $230 billion per year, roughly 2% of GDP. That's equivalent to losing a major war every single year, and no one blinks. Because in a system where speed equals productivity, slowing down equals economic loss. And that's how we ended up trapped in what researchers call the safety paradox. The faster and safer we build for cars, the more people die. The global epidemic. Today, car crashes kill 1.35 million people every year worldwide. They are the 8th leading cause of death globally. Among young people aged 5 to 29, they are the #1 cause. And still, we call them accidents. How the word accident protects power language shapes perception, and perception shapes policy. When a plane crashes, we demand an investigation. When a bridge collapses, we form a commission. When 40,000 people die on roads, we shrug. Why? Because the word accident suggests inevitability. No one's fault, no one's responsibility. In 2015, the Associated Press officially discouraged journalists from using accident when negligence or design is involved. The U.S. Department of Transportation even launched a campaign. Crashes aren't accidents. But the car industry fought back again, quietly, through lobbying, through funding road safety nonprofits that emphasize driver behavior over infrastructure reform. They fund campaigns about texting, drunk driving, and seatbelts, all important issues, but all focused on individual blame. Not system design, not policy. Because the moment you admit that crashes are policy outcomes, you're asking who profits from that policy, and who pays the price. A tale of two streets compare this. In the Netherlands, engineers redesigned cities after the 1970s. Oil crisis with a principle called Vision Zero. The idea: no loss of life is acceptable. Streets were narrowed, cars slowed, bikes prioritized. Result: the Netherlands now has one of the lowest road fatality rates in the world. Now look at the United States, where freedom of mobility means 40,000 deaths per year, and over 6,500 pedestrians killed in 2023, the highest in 4 decades. The difference isn't luck, it's policy choice. The myth of personal responsibility. For decades, safety campaigns have told us: drive safe, watch out for pedestrians, don't drink and drive, and of course, these matter, but they're only part of the picture. The blame game. After every high-profile crash, the same pattern unfolds. A driver is blamed, punished, and forgotten. A press release promises more enforcement, and the system continues unchanged, but enforcement is reactive. It punishes after harm is done. Design is proactive. It prevents harm from happening. Yet policymakers consistently underfund safe design while overfunding police patrols and awareness campaigns, because design changes require political courage. And courage is in short supply when lobbyists are in the room. Why we keep building dangerous roads? The U.S. spends hundreds of billions annually on road construction, yet nearly all of it reinforces the same deadly logic: wider lanes, faster speeds, more highways. Transportation researcher Charles Moran calls it the growth Ponzi scheme. Every new highway promises short-term growth, new suburbs, new malls, new tax revenue. But within years, maintenance costs explode, traffic returns, and cities go broke maintaining infrastructure that kills their citizens. Meanwhile, oil companies profit from the extra fuel burned. Auto manufacturers sell more cars. Developers cash in on sprawl. Everyone wins, except the public. Modern parallels. Data, death, and denial. Here's the part few people talk about. We know exactly how to stop most traffic deaths, but we don't. The science we ignore, study after study proves it. Reducing speed limits saves lives. Roundabouts cut severe crashes by 80%. Separated bike lanes reduce fatalities by 90%. Street lighting, curb extensions, pedestrian islands, all proven, all underused. Why? Because each one challenges the car-first model, the invisible policy that says mobility for cars comes before safety for people. And that's not a technical problem. That's political. The business of freedom. In the 2010s, as car deaths rose again, automakers began selling a new fantasy. Freedom through technology. Self-driving cars, lane assist, automatic braking. Billions poured into the idea that AI could fix what bad policy created. But automation doesn't solve moral design. It just hides it under software. Tesla's full self-driving mode has been linked to multiple fatal crashes. Uber's self-driving test vehicle killed a pedestrian in 2018, and yet, companies face minimal accountability because the framework still calls them accidents. Shocking modern data between 2010 and 2022, pedestrian deaths in the US increased by 77%, even as car safety features improved. Why? Because cars got larger. SUVs and trucks now make up 80% of new US sales. They sit higher, hit harder, and kill more. Researchers estimate that switching from sedans to SUVs has led to 3,000 extra pedestrian deaths per year. And yet, safety agencies have no regulations limiting hood height or front-end design. Why? Because automakers lobby to exclude those tests. That's not physics. That's policy. The pattern repeats. Every crash is a mirror. Every generation has told itself the same story, that crashes are unfortunate, tragic, but necessary, the price of progress. But history tells another story, a pattern repeating for over a century. A new form of mobility appears. It kills. The public demands reform. Industry shifts the blame. Policy adapts not to save lives but to protect markets. From horse-drawn carriages to Teslas, the narrative hasn't changed, only the excuses have. The takeaways, the price of denial. So what can we actually learn from all this? Here are 3 truths most people never hear. Takeaway number 1, safety is a design choice. Every intersection, lane width, and speed limit is a decision. When engineers choose efficiency over safety, that's policy. When cities prioritize parking over sidewalks, that's policy. And when lawmakers accept 40,000 annual deaths as normal, that's not tragedy, that's consent. Takeaway number 2, accountability requires language. As long as we call them accidents, nothing changes. The moment we say crash, we name responsibility, designers, policymakers, corporations. Changing words changes who we hold accountable. Takeaway number 3, freedom requires limits. True freedom isn't driving 80 miles an hour. It's the freedom to walk, bike, and live without fear of dying in someone else's commute. It's the freedom for children to play outside again. And that kind of freedom requires rules, design, and courage. The warning and the choice. The story of road deaths isn't about fate. It's about power, who gets to move, who gets to live, and who gets blamed. And until we start treating crashes not as accidents, but as policy failures, nothing will change. Because the truth is, we built a system that values speed over safety, profit over people, and convenience over life. But if we built it, we can rebuild it. The question is, will we? If this opened your eyes, don't let it fade with the next headline. Share this story. Demand better design. And next time someone calls it an accident, remind them, crashes aren't accidents. They're policy.